We are out on fatigue duty building bridges for the siege guns today. At 10 o'clock there was heavy firing on the left and heavy volleys by pickets during the night. It was very warm and close here at times. Franklin's division is on the move and the river is very low again. I'm still sick, and so the doctor gives me mercury, morphine, whiskey, and a tincture of sulfuric acid. Later in the afternoon, I had morphine and more whiskey. I feel some bit better. There was a rain shower in the morning, and 5 siege guns are placed in position near Dr. Gaines. We were up early in the morning and marched to the rear of our old camp. We packed up, moved, and burned stores, and then sent our wagons to the rear over the Chickahominy. We then went back about 1.5 miles and formed in line to check the enemy, leaving our knapsacks behind, never to see them again. We had a heavy battle there at Gaines' Mill, with the brigade on our left breaking and retreating with great loss. The Irish brigade came in and drove the Rebs back while our artillery gave them a lively shelling. Sleeping on the sand without any blanket, I woke up at about 1 o'clock and we crossed the river. It was one of those awful marches, night marches where we'd move 150 or 100 feet just to rest 10 minutes or a half hour. We have no tents to speak of either, so we slept in an open field, and I awoke feeling more sick than ever. We arrived today at the James River, sleeping and resting till afternoon. And then, tired and weary, we were called out across the swamp to go up the hill again and form a line of battle. I'm sick and excused by the doctor, but cannot bear to leave the regiment, so I go along with them up the hill. We formed in a line while a battery opened on the left, which was soon silenced by our battery. We then moved to the extreme left of Malvern Hill to protect another battery and changed positions often throughout the day. There was heavy fighting on the right, and currently we are in a wheat field, so I covered myself with straw to keep out the heat. At last, near dark, they came in force to try us, but we held them. We lose Colonel Woodbury and many officers and men in the fight. Finally, we were relieved and go to the rear when our ammunition is gone, but our troops hold the ground. Tired and sore with the loading and firing, we laid down in the dust. Many of the men were wounded, and they could get no sight of surgeons who were busy with the worst cases. Lieutenant Gordon was struck in the shoulder in the first of the fight, and I tied his handkerchief on his arm to try and stop the bleeding. He kept with us all through the night, but we lost him in the morning. On the front, the shells were flying, and the musketry continued lively until nearly 10 o'clock. We did not mind it much, and most of us fell fast asleep. We marched from Middletown to Boonesboro to Gettysburg and then on to Antietam today. A great army with many soldiers are here, and we encamp near General McClellan's headquarters. In the morning, we go forward to support the batteries, 20-pound Parrott cannons. While there, we get some glimpse of the smoke and changes of the lines of battle from the hills. Our troops turn the rebel left with the light batteries and cavalry going forward. And we also witness Burnside crossing the stone bridge of Antietam Creek. We then advanced on through Sharpsburg. Nearly every house there was struck with solid shot or shell. Things look rough, and the rebels have stripped the houses of everything. The Union sentiment is strong here, and as we go through, women point out the houses of those who have given the rebels shelter and where rebel flags are concealed. We go out beyond the town to where the rebels are on opposite side of the river with 2 companies ordered out as sharpshooters. And toward the night, the regiment is ordered to cross the river and take a battery which is disputing the passage. While going down the river, a fragment of shell struck the man in front of me, taking the top of his head off and killing him instantly. We lost but a few men in crossing. The river was some 500 feet wide there and not very warm. After driving the rebels away, we swam back across, tried to dry ourselves, and got some coffee. We are shelling Fredericksburg today. One continuous roar from 5 o'clock until dark, with heavy firing by moonlight of gunboats and siege guns. The next afternoon, we crossed the river and advanced under fire outside of the town, into the smoke and dust of battle. Words cannot tell what was witnessed there. We lost but a few of our men, but there are many in the field dead and dying. And we lay awake all night on the cold, damp ground, hearing the groans and calls of the wounded. And in the morning we were subjected to non-stop sharpshooting and laid low all day. Almost every man who stands up is shot. 5 regiments laying close to the ground and having to lay there all day long, waiting. For what? Thinking of what on that bright December day? Home, church, and friends. Nothing to eat save what we have. No coffee or meat. No orders at all. No nothing. We witnessed a splendid aurora borealis that evening and lay down to sleep in the streets near the railroad. With an early move in the mud and rain the next morning, we found ourselves in our old camp on the hill near the Potomac Creek Bridge, where we began fixing tents for the winter. We awoke in Chancellorsville to build breastworks this morning and are joined by General Griffin with his whole command. Eventually we moved to the center to repel the efforts of the rebels to break our lines, giving them grape and canister for their efforts. The woods are on fire where many are wounded, and we take many prisoners in the fight. There are 6 attempts to break our lines, which are repulsed each time. During the battle, I was struck with a spent ball, making a mark on the back of my right hand. The regiment deployed as skirmishers to the front over the breastworks and into the woods where the fire burned. There I saw soldiers crisped, burned, and cracked open. A horrible sight. The rebels opened on us while we were there with grape and canister and shell, with an attack to the left, and were finally repulsed. In the afternoon, we get ready to leave in the rain. Striking our tents about 10 in the evening, we wait in the rain till 4 o'clock in the morning and then fall in and move. After crossing the river, we stop in the woods and sleep soundly and quietly with no sounds of alarm. We marched at about 9 o'clock to Hanover. There was a big cavalry fight here yesterday. We ate supper and then marched on towards Gettysburg, through villages all along the road, and past splendid farms with large barns. We were up the next morning at 3:30 a.m., forming in a line of battle on the right. We formed by battalion and moved to the left and center, remaining in the hot sun and listening to the sound of the guns until about 4 o'clock. We then moved to the left towards Round Top and go in. Of the 23 men in my company, 5 were killed. Gregory, Purdy, Pendleton, Brink, and Wilson. Captain Robinson was wounded and taken prisoner, and Lieutenant Walker was severely wounded. In the melee, when we were driven back and flanked, about 70 men were taken prisoners on the right. After a few minutes, part of the 3rd Corps, being in our front in the woods south, countermarched and formed facing to the south. Our regiment had rested at first, but we now moved out and faced west, and then hinged on the right, swinging backward into an open wheat field, and in beyond which part of the 2nd Brigade were fighting. The 3rd Corps were badly cut up in the woods, and wounded men were coming back all the time through our ranks when we were finally ordered forward. Meantime, the rebels had silenced the battery on our right and had taken the artillery pieces and were advancing upon our flank. We advanced on across the wheat field to the woods and opened fire upon the few rebels in our front, and while the force coming in on our flank came in collision with the right of the regiment in the woods, and being checked here a little, and the other points of the line advancing, they soon were on all sides of us. The right sent down to the colonel the Rebs were coming in on our flank, and he ordered us to wheel to the rear to face them and then to fall back slowly across the wheat field. Many of our men never left those woods. We rallied by Battery D of the 5th Artillery while the Pennsylvania reserves went in to regain the ground. We only had about 80 men still alive. Darkness closed the fight, and we spent the remainder of the night gathering the dead and wounded. We crossed the James River this morning and remained on the heights. The men had an opportunity to bathe and time for dinner. We began the march about 1 o'clock to Petersburg. The road was very dry and dusty, and houses had been burned all along the road, so there was no shelter for stragglers. A very hot and dusty and tedious march. We stopped about 10 o'clock for supper in a field 1 full half-mile from any water at all, so we went on to sleep. I woke in time to swallow some coffee and remount my horse in the clear moonlight. We walked and rode maybe 50 minutes, and then would rest 10, and we continued that march until about 2 o'clock in the morning. There was heavy fighting in our front. We moved to the front and left of Colonel Schweitzer, who left us in the rear, saying he would call on us only in case of urgent need. So we stay all day and heard the shell and musketry and dreamed of going home, for tomorrow we start homeward bound if we survive today. All day long men go to the rear wounded. Ambulances come up near us for the loads. The timber boys of a battery come back to us and fill from their ammunition boxes, and the men tell of the events of the day, and then they go to the front, and another section comes back, and so on until evening. About 9 o'clock, someone brings the mail and distributes it, and then fall into the front. Colonel Schweitzer sends for us, and so down we go into the darkness, and where the musketry is sounding right lively, too lively for the comfort of men going home tomorrow. We crossed the railroad and changed positions several times. At last we began throwing up earthworks, and I soon took 2 rails and another for a pillow and slept soundly with no blanket. Sharpshooting seems to have been indulged very freely during the night, as in the morning Lieutenant Gunner had been wounded, and several other of the men never made it home from those woods.
If you enjoyed today's video and would like to see more content like this, be sure to take a shot at the like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest BirdDogg content. And if you'd like to support the channel, for a limited time there's exclusive Civil War Diaries merchandise available in the video link below.